everybody. Welcome to today's audit committee. In the room, we have with us Bill Mahoney. Online, we have Counselor Zaida Govan and Mr. Young No. So welcome.
Thank you.
I don't think, I'm not sure if Counselor Allen will be able to make it, but if he does, great. But without further ado, Mr. No, I'll throw it in your lane. Oh, speaking right on time. Look at that.
Okay, great.
Welcome, Tim, Counselor Allen. And so with that, I'll send it over to you, Mr. No.
Great. I'll share my screen. Hopefully you could see the report titled Performance Audit of Cities Workers' Compensation Program.
We can see it. I just want to toggle the screen a little bit. If you could zoom in just a little bit on it.
Will do. Is that better?
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I have 3 reports to present to the audit committee. I want to thank you for your time. These reports include the workers' compensation review and 2 follow-up reviews, both pertaining to programs at the Springfield Police Department. One being the compensatory overtime and the other the educational incentive program. These are follow-up reviews on initial audits that were performed back in 2021. So with that said, I'll start off with the workers' compensation review. First, I want to thank Bill Mahoney, his staff, and FutureComp for their cooperation and courtesies extended. The reason why we did this audit is because it was on our audit plan. The objective of this audit was to assess the city's oversight over the third-party administrator and assess the city's risk mitigation processes related to workplace injuries. Our scope included fiscal year 23 and most of fiscal year 24 up to March 2024. And it excluded firefighters and the Springfield police officers, as they have another program or another third-party administrator that administers their worker compensation claims. So with that, I want to give you some background about workers' comp. So workers' comp is, I guess, defined or the guidance is provided by Mass General laws. Workers' comp benefits aims to ensure employees receive benefits in case of injury on the job. The city administers a self-insurance workers' comp program, so we're self-insured. FutureComp is the city's third-party administrator who manages all of the city's workers' comp claims, as I mentioned, except for those claims that pertain to public safety, fire, and police. So on page 2, I want to show you basically the workers' comp expense for FY22 and FY 2023. So the workers' comp claims expense fairly consistent, going down somewhat in FY 23, close was at 1.8 million, and in FY 22 was about 2 million. So for year to date, March 2024, which is FY 24, running about 865, which if we were to annualize it for FY 24, it would be running at about 1.2 million. So positive trends. Workers' comp claims are going down. I want to turn your attention to page 4. And this lists out the number of claims by department. So as you can see from this table, 2 departments primarily make up the lion's share of worker comp claims. One is the Springfield School Department, and the other is the Department of Public Works. From speaking with them, Bill Mahoney, he indicated that teachers, as common with any inner city school environment, often get injured, breaking up fights, student fights. And with Department of Public Works, you have people or workers picking up heavy items like trash bins when making trash runs, so they often get injured. So with that said, I will jump into our findings and recommendations. So finding 1A. So this has to do with the service rates that are billed or used in billing the city by the TPA. So the contract with the TPA specifies rates that they will use to charge the city. So for example, they have a utilization rate. A utilization review is a review that they do to determine what medical treatment is appropriate for someone who's injured. And they, in the contract, that rate says it's $140 per claim. When we looked at the actual billing, we noted that it didn't agree to that 140 as defined in the contract. The rates were vastly different in that it ranged from $70 to over $1,300. So big difference. Contract's a little bit more specific. The other thing we noted in looking at these invoices was that their invoice wasn't very detailed. I mean, you would expect their invoices to be detailed so that you could agree the rates that they're using to build a city, and you could trace it back to the contract. They were basically listing total charges. So it makes it very difficult to trace the rates that they're using back to the contract. So what we're recommending to HR is have the FutureCom change the billing in that they be more granular in their bills, so that HR could actually tie back the rates to the contract. And if the rates are different, then we're recommending that HR work with legal to modify the contract to use the rates that or list the rates in the contract that are actually used by the TPA or third-party administrator. Any questions?
Let me just make sure I have changed my view real quick. Just want to make sure there's no questions from counselors.
Not right now for me anyway. I don't think Counselor Allen has his hand up either.
No, I didn't see any hands up.
There I am.
You got any questions, Counselor Allen?
Yeah, I guess if I had a question, it would just be, how can there be such a discrepancy between when they try to average it out at 140 or something? What could cause something to be as much as that 1,300 or something?
My guess is like when they initially set up the contract, they thought that 140 would be an average, but obviously it's not an average. And these rates do vary, so it should be. I guess what I'm recommending is that HR should work with the TPA, saying, let's define the contract so that we could specify the rates that you're going to use. Maybe specify a range, as opposed to quantifying a specific dollar figure.
Yep.
So, I'm sorry, and if I may, I'm not sure, I'm sure that this is going through some insurance company or something, and what happens is when you bill an insurance company, you bill, say, for example, your rate, right? Your rate is $250. The insurance company could give you anywhere between 80 and 150. They won't give you the whole 250. They'll give you whatever rate they're paying at the time.
So this is the rate actually the TPA charges the city. So this is the rate that they're billing the city of Springfield is $140 per review of the claim file. And they're also just supposed to, have this charge once or one charge per claim file. We noted that there were multiple charges per claim file as well. So again, just.
And I'm
think
sorry,
about that.
Mr. No, who's the TPA?
It's future comp.
What is it?
Future comp.
Future comp. Is that what TPA stands for?
The TPA stands for a third-party administrator. So they
I see.
administer all the claims for the city. The city outsources this the services to a third-party administrator.
I see. So there's an additional middleman in between the insurance company and the city.
Right. Yeah, this is strictly a service that the service fees that the third-party administrator charges the city for doing these reviews.
Wow.
Thanks, Counselor Govan, and Counselor
you.
Allen. Those are some of the similar questions I had. I did have one question that kind of goes back to some of your charts that show the decline over time in terms of the number of workers' comps. And I was just curious to know, what do we know? Like any reasons why it dropped that significantly? I know there were still a few months there in that fiscal year to be completed, but to see that gradual decline, was there prior to 2022, was it still as high? Was there an incline? I mean, increase?
Speaking with Director Mahoney, this could be partly attributable to weather. We're seeing less snowstorms, and so if you have less snow and ice, less falls. I think weather may have had some impact on the decrease in workers' compensation claims. And Bill, could you chime in on this as well? I mean, I don't know.
Sure. That's certainly one factor. I think another factor is that the claims haven't matured that much in that third year. And as the claims mature, the cost of the claim goes up.
Oh, okay.
So that's definitely an issue. And we'll see that as, we track this for a number of years going back. And we look at this, how we've been doing year after year after year. And we get down to actually the quarter to quarter. So I actually run my own comparison of, how the second quarter of FY25 compares with the second quarter of 24, 23, 22, and 21. So we can just get a good track of how we're actually measuring on parts of the years without having the maturity issue going on. But I think a lot of it is, as Young said, we have milder winter, we have less slip and falls, we have less ice issues, less parking lot issues, but we also have the claim has not matured as much.
That makes sense. Thank you for answering. And then the other question I had to do with the top right there, that the claims filed by department. I just wanted to get a few seconds to see the other departments. So Parks Department comes in third, followed by police. Okay. That was pretty much it. I also want to recognize we have Counselor Victor Davila who just joined us. Thank you for joining us, Counselor Davila.
Thank you for having me.
All right. If there are no other questions, I'll let you continue on, Mr. No.
Sure. Okay, so I'll move on to our second finding, and it's also fee related. So we noted that the TPAs, or the third-party administrator, fees exceeded the contractual maximum. So the contract specified that there's a cap on their fees at $213,000. So this 213, that 213,000 is comprised of a few components. One is their claims administration fee is at approximately $115,000. Then they have service fees for utilization review up to $28,000. Medical case management service, which is $64,000. and a bill review of for up to 55,000. So all of that equals about 213,000 annually. So when we so the TPA is or the third party administrator is also required to notify human resources when they're reaching that contractual maximum of 213,000. So what we noted was that for FY23, the TPA received 270,000 in fees, and which was approximately 58,000 more than what the contract specified. We also noted that they didn't notify HR that, hey, you're exceeding, you're reaching your cap. So even though the contract required it, we're recommending that the HR department work with legal to see if the amounts have to be repaid or the contract needs to be amended to allow for this overage.
So let me ask a question. So the fees on this contract, do they just automatically get paid whatever they're charging, or is there somebody who actually has to go out and physically make that payment? So I guess curious, how do we go over the 213 and we don't know about it?
They're billed, they send bills to the HR department. The HR
So you're
department.
saying the bills themselves are going over that amount? But
Yes,
we-
exactly. The bills themselves.
But we still end up paying them,
Right.
right?
Because the fee, the services were provided, but the
Got
amount
it.
that they billed was over the contractual limit.
Got it. Okay.
Now, we're recommending that HR department implement processes, procedures to ensure that the TPA notifies the HR department when that contractual limit is about to be reached. And also getting detailed bills, like a running total saying, hey, this is how much you spent to date on the most recent invoice, so that there's information there that they could monitor.
Just question. So you said that this 213 figure, we went over, you said by 58 to the 270 or whatever that number was.
Yes.
Is that the most recent full fiscal year that you have? But which fiscal year is that?
Fiscal year 2020, fiscal year 23. That's
Okay.
the fiscal year that we looked at.
Okay. And so that one was higher than the fiscal year 22?
So we didn't look at fiscal year 22 because it was not within our scope. What we're going to do when we do the follow-up is take a look at the full year fiscal year 24 to see if we have this issue again in fiscal year 24. But
Got it.
But for fiscal year 23, the year that we looked at, the full fiscal year that we looked at, we noted that there was an overpayment.
Yeah, I was just curious to know what it was before. Again, right, if you looked at the chart of cost and claims, right, you had two elevated years in fiscal 22 and 23, and then, somewhat of a drop, and a significant drop in 24, although to Mr. Mahoney's point, we're still not, we probably still don't know the full actuals of what that is. So I'm curious to see what those fees look like if there's a significant drop.
Yep, so what I could do is I could include that in my follow-up work so that you could have that information when we report back to you on our follow-up review.
Right, okay. Any questions from any counselors?
Not at this time for me, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Govan.
Yeah, I'm all set with that. Sorry, I was muted.
That's all right. I put you on mute, Councilor Allen, when Councilor Govan was talking, because you could hear the echo from your car.
My beautiful car was making noise.
Yes. All right, Mr. No, thank you. Continue.
Okay, so let me see if I can turn the page here. So the next finding has to do with the third-party administrator, they administer workers' compensation claims, which include ensuring all the required forms are collected from the employee who has been injured, along with their supervisors. The city requires that all supervisors fill out an incident report describing what happened involving the injured employee. And they're supposed to submit that to the third-party administrator. And the third-party administrator is supposed to have this form in their database. When we did our testing, we noted these forms from many departments were not being collected by the third-party administrator. So these forms are pretty important because they get at the root cause as to why the accident had occurred. We're recommending that the HR department implement procedures to ensure that supervisors remit these forms to the third-party administrator, along with checking the third-party administrator's database to ensure that these forms are being collected.
That's a huge point, especially if you're saying that the Springfield Public Schools is the biggest portion of that, and they're not completing their forms. I mean, that to me is a big no-no, especially if it's what, 55% of the claims.
Yes.
I would imagine, Bill, you're in talks with your counterparts over there.
We do. We, in our note there, we noticed the safety coordinator sent out a reminder to the departments, you need to complete these forms. I mean, I agree with the auditor, we want the forms completed. We want the injury forms completed timely. I mean, there is a, there has been a lag in both the employees reporting it and the supervisors reporting it. And we don't want any lag at all. We want to have all that stuff in as quickly as we can, because that's the best way to manage a claim. So the auditor's exactly right about that.
Thank you. I mean, I'd also like to highlight, I mean, while sad that DPW is the only department that's doing it, so that obviously we have significant, some improvements to do within our own city side departments. But I also, I guess, gotta give for all the crap that we give Signoli,
Chris.
we gotta give him his props that he's completing the reports. But I mean, I think, I make light of it, but Bill, I mean, obviously, I know you're having conversations with the other city side department heads, but I mean, he shouldn't be the only one completing these forms, especially if we need these and some of these big cases that we're paying out huge amount of sum.
Right.
I guess what's the process been on your end to try to get folks to?
We have a workers' comp kit that is sent out, and we've done trainings on it, and we send reminders out. We're very decentralized, so that if you are at you're at one of our locations very far from City Hall, and whether it's a school or another facility of ours, and you don't have workers' compensation claims, and all of a sudden you get one, you haven't had any experience in going through it. DPW, on the other hand, we have people that have gotten hurt there, and it's been, there's a system in place, and they know exactly what to do and how to do it. We have made that an issue time and again with different departments, saying you got to get this stuff in. This is important. These forms have to be filled out right away.
Is that just like a training that we have to do for them?
We've done training for that, yes, and we sent the whole packet out. We have a whole workers' compensation packet. It's on our website. It's available to any employee and any supervisor. And we're available to answer the call, to answer the phone if they call.
Thank you. Councilor Govan, see your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think sounds to me like there might be kind of like a culture of not either knowing to do the forms or not making it a priority, because if, like Mr. Mahoney said, if they've had trainings, they've had follow-ups and reminders, it just sounds like it might be a culture of not needing to complete the forms in their eyes. So I'm just wondering if there's a way for us to make sure that happens, because what happens, and I know that, these forms are probably used for informing some changes that might need to be made in some of the, systems that we have in place to make sure that these accidents or incidents don't happen again. So then if we don't know about them, we can't fix them. So I imagine there are some people out there saying, oh, this happened again. I don't know what keeps going on. And it's probably because no one knows about it because these incidents and accident reports haven't been filled out. So I agree with you, Mr. Chair, that we need to find a way to make sure that this happens. And I also have to commend Chris Ignoli for him completing the forms.
So if I could add
Thank you,
something
Mr.
here,
Chair.
Thank you.
if I could add something here, I think it's incumbent upon the future comp to ensure that these forms are being collected. So they can't let it go because they have a contractual requirement to collect these forms.
Right. If I may, Mr. Chair, and that's what I think, trying to get at, like, isn't there some reason, some way, I guess, maybe to make sure that the forms are filled out? Either we don't compensate things or or do something unless the forms are filled out. And if it's a requirement of the TPA that you said, then I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that it happens. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. All right.
All right, so if there are no further questions, I'll move on to the last finding that I'd like to present, and that has to do with opportunities to reduce workplace injuries. So what we've seen was the city focuses its effort on administering the workers' compensation claims, and not so much that we've seen on mitigating the workplace injuries. So for example, we noted in this table here that, there are a lot of repeat claims filed by employees in these departments. As I mentioned, Springfield Public Schools is one, DPW is another. So we didn't see any analysis presented in terms of identifying those departments that have a lot of repeat claims so that training could be tailored to these departments. For example, the school department, when we reached out to the school department, we weren't aware of any training programs for their teachers to mitigate their injuries. We also noted that the third-party administrator has a contractual obligation to provide written loss control recommendations to mitigate injuries. So they're required by the contract to provide recommendations. We didn't see any. So we're recommending that the department implement training programs, formal training programs at the school department, along with other high-risk departments. Also, have the TPA provide written loss recommendations to the city to mitigate the risks that they're seeing. Also, there are grants out there offered by the state to offset the cost for providing training programs.
Any questions from my colleagues?
I just agree with Mr. No.
Yeah, I would agree. I guess my question is, it sounds like there's a lot on the back of the third-party administrator. I guess, one, how long have we had this contractor, I guess?
At least 15 years, maybe longer than that, 16, 17, 18 years probably.
And I guess my assumption, what I'm trying to ask is, so we've had them for a number of years, and it seems like they've worked out, because we wouldn't continue to have them if they haven't, but here it seems like the number of findings of things that they're not doing, that sounds like it's part of their contractual obligations, or?
They're in my opinion, they've been a very good vendor for us. There are some things, as the auditor points out, that we need to work on, particularly along his early findings on the billing. And we have been working on that with the vendor. We're working on the vendor with it yesterday, as a matter of fact. So we are tightening some of the controls up, but we can do a better job on our end. I think there's some things they can do a better job on as well. But overall, I rate them as a highly skilled vendor. And they are using the tools that we talk about in order to keep our costs down. I mean, these are the tools that we talked about at the beginning of the meeting. So they're actually doing a good job for us.
Is this just a portion of what the contract is, or is this completely the contract? It's just workers' comp claims?
So as the auditor was pointing out, this doesn't cover police and fire IOD, but they are now our vendor for that as of, I think, July 1. Our previous vendor folded up and went out of business,
Okay.
I think on June 30th. And we went out to bid and we did select this vendor to handle police and fire IODs. It's a separate contract.
Okay. Why is that a separate contract? Just because of the nature of the jobs?
Good question. There's two different statutes in play here. This here for workers' comp is under Mass General Law, Chapter 152, and police and fire are under Chapter 41, Section 100 and 111F. It's not part of the workers' comp system. So the cases that for police and fire don't go to the Industrial Accident Board. The cases that we've been talking about tonight, if we say, we don't believe this was a legitimate claim, we can take that all the way to hearing and further at the Industrial Accident Board. And we have outside counsel that represents us in that, and we do it.
Got it. Makes sense now. All right.
Right, so I'll conclude if there are no further questions on workers' comp and move on to the follow-up reports with the Springfield Police Department.
Yep. I don't see any hands or anything, so I'd say yes, let's go.
Okay, so as part of our audit process is when we do an initial audit, we make recommendations, and we usually have those recommendations agreed to by management. And our procedure is to follow up on those recommendations to see if they were implemented. So we had done this review at the Springfield Police Department regarding their compensatory overtime program. So just the background, a very brief background. Springfield officers have the option to either be paid directly for overtime hours worked or to defer payment of those overtime hours by accruing the time as comp time. So you could, if you work overtime hours, you can elect to have your hours put into a bank and be paid those hours at some point in the future. So BOT hours are capped at 300 hours. When we did the audit, the liability for the BOT hours was over $1 million, approximately 1.2 million. So when we did the audit in 2020, we had the following findings. The recording of the BOT, the process was very manual, so it was prone to errors. The BOT policies were stale. They mentioned manual logs. It didn't really reflect current practices. The BOT, had completed, excuse me?
So just started, huh?
Just started,
Okay.
yeah.
So the incorrect BOT forms were being used. When I say BOT, that means bankable overtime or comp time. And most importantly, I want to point this out. There is an inherent cost to the city in running this comp program, this BOT program, in that officers can bank the hours at a lower rate than at some point in the future get paid out at a higher rate. So you could, bank your hours when you work as a patrolman in much lower rate than when you're about to retire as a captain, be paid out at that much higher rate. So that's a huge difference and has an impact on the city.
Wait, can you explain that to me one more time? So you can bank hours and there's, I guess, no like use it or lose it. It's just unlimited until.
Yep. Well, there's a cap of 300 hours, but let's say you could bank like, if you worked 100 hours of overtime, you could bank those 100 hours of overtime, you know, when you earn them as a patrolman. And you in cash out when you're about to retire. And you,
Well,
and maybe
that's what I
you
meant.
retire.
Yeah. I heard the cap of 300. I guess my question was like, for instance, like in some places you have vacation time and some of your vacation time can go on forever and then some of it, you know, you're capped. So I guess as long as you don't hit the 300, you can keep it till whenever you retire. So essentially, whatever you earned when you were making one rate, you are now cashing out at whatever your latest rate is. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Exactly.
That is.
Okay.
So that was our main finding, with this audit. We made 10 recommendations, five of which have been implemented. One was in process, and that the one in process regarding updating their BOT procedures, and there were 3 that were not implemented because they were no longer applicable. They had to do with payroll processes. The city is migrating to a new payroll platform, so that made it not applicable. And there was one that will not be implemented, and that's what we just talked about. We made the recommendation that the city reach out to the union to see if they could formalize a policy or change or have a policy in place where the BOT hours get cashed out before you move on to a different position. So so basically, it's like a use it policy where, you know, if you earn them at a patrolman rate, you know, before you move to the next rank, you get paid out those BOT hours. Guess it was a non-starter for the union because you know, changing past practice and basically taking a benefit away from officers. Any questions?
Any questions from my colleagues?
I have a quick question. Just want to clarify. So, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Council Davila.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Director. No. So basically, I think you just answered my question. The union, the police union, it's resisting the use it or cash it because of past practices.
Yes, it's a benefit. It's very difficult to take a benefit away from police officers or any employee.
Right.
And it's based upon past practice. And I guess Bill could probably give you more insight on this.
Yeah, and so, and just to be clear, so if a patrolman, I'm just going to throw a number out there, is making $35 an hour, he has OT in the bank, and now he can bank it. Now he's a captain and he's making $90 an hour, just to throw a number. He will cash out at $90 an hour, supposed to.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. And do we know roughly what percentage of the officers are taking the time as opposed to banking it? In other words, are we seeing a higher rate of people using the time versus the people that are banking it?
So we're seeing a lot of officers banking the time because it is a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, when we did the audit, the liability for the city was over $1 million related to bankable overtime.
But that was actually my next question, Director. No, so it's over $1 million of liability current, or is that a projection into the future?
It's based upon the liability currently. So that liability is going to go up every year because the rates go up, right? It's just based upon the hours times the current rate.
I understand, but I guess, is there any way that we can have a sense? I have a funny feeling that this could get out of control.
No, it's already out of control.
No, I agree, but you know, I'm talking about you know, just to have a sense. I don't know, Dr. Mahoney, if you want to chime in, but do we have a sense of like what are we looking into liability into the banking hours in 3 or 5 years?
So there is an advantage to what we are doing here in these contracts. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, which governs our police officers, the cap is actually 480 hours, but we've negotiated a cap many years ago with 300 hours. And the advantage to us as a city is that if that is time that is used and we don't backfill for that officer, we never pay anything for the overtime. So if the officer says, listen, I've got this time in my bank and I'm going to take a week off, but we've got great coverage anyways because we're now at full staffing. We never paid for that. We never paid for that time off. We actually got that time off. That was a freebie to the city because
They already earned it.
they've earned it as time off and not as cash coming out of the city's treasury. So that's the advantage to us doing that. There's also a provision in both of the contracts that provide for the employee can ask at any time to be paid for that comp time. As long as they give us some reasonable notice, they can say, listen, I've got 100 hours of comp time and I'm thinking about buying whatever. I like to cash that time out as a patrol officer, and then we're gonna let them cash it out.
It's definitely a good benefit to the officer, and I could see the value of it. But I think I will argue that at some point, we, the city, are going to pay for this one way or the other, whether it is now or in the future. We're going to pay for this, and so are we? I mean, not that I expect you to. Do you have any plan to address this, or if you can say in public, or is this currently under negotiations?
Well, I'm in negotiations right now. I don't have anything I want to say publicly about that. And I don't want to lead you to believe that I'm doing anything about it. I'm just saying I usually don't talk about my negotiations. But I don't see this as this is certainly not a paramount concern at least from my point of view. And I understand that there may be different opinions on that, but once we incur the overtime, we have an obligation to pay that.
Yeah.
So every hour worked over that, whatever, let's just say 40 is under law, we have to pay that. And we have an option to give them time off instead. And if they want to build that bank up to take the time off, we can come out ahead on the game if we don't have to backfill for that person when they're taking that time off. If we do have to backfill, we didn't really come out ahead of the game. So I'm not as worried about this as some. I can tell you, I actually had a conversation with the last CAFL about it, and I said, I'm not particularly worried because, they're going to, even if we paid it out before they promoted to sergeant, they're just going to incur another set of hours as a sergeant. It's just going to keep going because there's always going to be overtime.
Definitely different perspective, Director Mahoney, which I did not think about. Now, this BTO, that's only for officers. Does not include SPOs, because SPOs technically are retired, correct?
Oh, yeah, it's not for the SPOs. They don't work overtime. They just work the details.
Just work the details. Okay. But there's nothing, whatever they work gets paid out immediately. They don't have any kind of special bank or anything for them.
No, they should submit their slips in a timely manner and get paid.
Okay, I see. Okay, well, that number of $1 million, they catch my eyes, and I understand, Director, that you have a different point of view, which I can appreciate. But just doing my due diligence, and at the end of the day, we're going to be talking about property taxes, so we do have a duty to look at everything. So, thank you, Director. No.
Yeah, but I want to reiterate, for someone who is financially savvy, this could be it is a benefit because it's basically you could earn it at one rate and be paid out at a much higher rate.
Yeah, sure.
My name, Mr. Chair, Dr. Mahoney. So that BTO, it's aside from the standard vacation time they're given, correct?
Absolutely, yes,
Yep.
yes.
Okay.
I was gonna ask that question, but I know Councilor Govan's had her hand up for a while. If she's still on.
Yeah, go. No more questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilor Govan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess my question was around the same question as Council Davila. But I think I got some clarification. I want to make sure, Bill, the so are you saying that right now as it stands, when they accrue the bank time, if they get promoted, they have to cash out that bank time at the rate that they
No,
are
they
being
don't.
promoted
No.
from, or no?
No, they do not. That's the
So-
point that Director No is making.
Right.
Yep.
So that is also my concern, especially, we're trying to be fiscally responsible, and I don't want to take anything away from the police officers because they work hard, and they do really good work for our city. But I would like to be able to say that the union is willing to negotiate, because this does sound like it could be a time bomb that's ticking. And if, like you said, some savvy officer that becomes a captain, that becomes you know a
Commissioner.
chief one day, or a commissioner, you know what I mean? The city would owe a lot of money to that officer. And I don't know where that money would come from. I think we just need to be really cautious. And I guess I would just love to be able to say that the union was able and willing to negotiate to a degree, either do what you said, right? As far as, like, if they do get a promotion, then have
Cash
them
back.
cash out that part, and then have them start accruing again, because it just doesn't seem right. Thank you,
mean-
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Govan. I kind of see it as almost like vacation time, right? Like vacation time, you get a cap at a certain point, but you don't lose it if you're under that cap, right? And if you get a promotion, you still have the same number of days, right? And you get paid out at a much higher rate. Is that kind of fair?
If you were promoted and then retired, yes, you would get,
So like, for instance, not even retired, like if I'm on one level, I get, I accrue vacation time, I get promoted, but I haven't used that vacation time. Now I want to use a few days or a chunk of those days in my promotion. I mean, you're gonna get paid at whatever your
Yeah.
higher rate is.
Yes.
And when I looked at, when I did the numbers on the 300 hours, that looks like it equates to about 40 days if you were to do it by 7.5 hours.
8.5, I think, for these guys.
Oh, 8.5, sorry. So then,
Yeah.
so my math, a little bit less. I guess I'd be more curious to know down the road, what's the cost difference, if there's even a way to track that? Like, is there a way to track somebody? Because that'd be so many different officers, and now you're tracking who got what at one point.
Mhm.
I'd be curious to know how much of a difference is it actually at the end of the day?
Mhm.
So, but I don't want to keep beating it up. I think, Director Knows mentioned that, and I know, Bill, you work hard in terms of these union negotiations, so I don't want to keep kicking this one any further.
But well, if I could reiterate, it's something that, we recommend, in future negotiations, is maybe to bring this
Yes.
up, to have it paid out prior to, the next promotion.
No, I think it's fair. I mean, it's one thing to be able to get paid out right after. I mean, they would still get paid the same rate if they were getting that overtime right when they earned it, correct?
It depends on how long they held on to the 300 hours.
No, what I'm saying is, if you earned overtime, let's say you earned several hours and you got it in your paycheck, it's your rate. It's not like, I don't know how these guys get paid OT versus, like, before overtime, you used to get like time and a half.
It's all time and a half.
It's
it's
also
all time and a half, right?
It's all time and a half.
So I guess what I'm saying is, if they get paid out when they earn it, they're getting time and a half. If they don't get paid out and they wait, that's just comp time and it's regular time?
No, comp time, again, and maybe I'm not following the question, but comp time is gonna be at the time and a half rate.
Oh, comp time would still be at okay.
So just to clarify, you would work 200 hours to get the 300 hours that we're talking about here. That's
Okay.
how you would get the 300 hours of comp time is because you worked 200 hours of extra overtime. That's how you get, so it's at a time and a half rate.
So okay, so I was assuming that the comp time would be normal time rate.
So we would pay the 300 hours at the normal rate of pay of that employee at the time that, you know, if we got it in the contract at the time of promotion or at the time of separation, we would pay it at the normal hourly rate, the 300 hours. But the comp time is earned at a time and a half rate. So again, you work 200 hours of overtime, you're going to have 300 hours in your BOT.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just have a
Yes.
thank you. Director No or Director Mahoney, I don't think I got an answer, but do we have a way of what's the current trend of the officers? They have a tendency of more of banking or using the time? Meaning that are they banking the time? Are they cashing the time? Are they comping the time? What's the trend that we see with the officers? If you have a answer to that.
I do not. I don't know. Young, do you have an answer on that?
No, when we did the audit, we noted there were a lot of officers partaking in this program.
But
But we could, certainly update the analysis to see where, the liability is as of the current fiscal year and report back
Right.
to the audit committee so that you have a figure in mind
Right.
and see how that compares to when we initially did the audit.
when you say partake in the program, what do you mean?
People are, because you can request, you have to request to bank your hours and it has to be approved.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's you have to be approved to bank your hours. So what we can do is do an analysis, see what the liability is currently compared to what it was when we did the audit.
Right. Well, I think at least for me, it would be if you could give me that data. I'm kind of curious as to what are the officers thinking themselves, because you're right, this is the benefit. It was already negotiated. And if they're using it, want to take anything away that benefits them. But we also have to be prudent into the future in the cost, because we know that the money cost it's going to be more costly into the future and harder to raise, of course.
So let me put it this way: I would certainly partake in the program because it's a good benefit.
Yes, absolutely, and so will I.
Yeah, I guess to Councilor Davila's point, I mean, if we're doing further analysis, it'd be helpful just to see what the breakdown is.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Chair. And so just to get a sense, I would like to know what the officer trend is. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I will report back to the audit committee on this trend at some point in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, I will move on to our next follow-up report.
Yep.
Okay. So the next follow-up report has to do with the what we call the educational incentive program. So just to give the audit committee a background, the educational incentive program is a program at the police department to encourage sworn officers to pursue higher education. Approximately 300 officers receive, they call it earned income payments annually in November, which are based on the officer's degree attained as of the prior September. So total EIP payments in 2019, when we did the audit, was approximately, it's 4.1 million. So historically, these payments were shared between the state and the municipality. But in 2010, the state eliminated funding for earned incentive program. In Springfield, the city negotiated with the union and revised the program in that EIP, or these earned incentive programs, would continue for employees hired before July 2009, and they would reduce it to 50% of payment for those hired after July 1st, 2009. So when we did the performance audit back in 2021, we had the following findings. We noted that department they weren't maintaining actual copies of degrees. Certain EIP payments did not comply with the agreements. We noted there were errors in EIP payments, especially when it related to promotions. There were some key contractual terms that were undefined. And the accounting methodology in recording the EIP expense didn't necessarily follow the city's accounting policy in that the expense should have been the payment should have been made ratably throughout the year as to making them at some future point in time at a higher rate. We made 9 recommendations, 4 of which were implemented. There was 1 in process, and that had to do with formalizing or clearly defining if EI earned incentive payments apply to the commissioner. I think that's been resolved. I think that's been in the most recent contract with the commissioner. And there were 4 that were deemed will not implement. And that had to do with the method, timing, process by which earned incentive payments was earned and paid. So specifically, we had recommended that the union clarify in their agreement the base rate. We assume the base rate pertains to annual pay, and that was their current practice. It was just not defined in the agreement. We also recommended that payment dates be clearly defined. So the payment dates, as I mentioned, happened in November. But we noted in the agreement, there were a couple of dates in November that were mentioned. So we recommended that it be clearly defined in the agreement as the second pay period, if that's what they wanted to use. We also recommended the process for the actual distribution. Most people get their paychecks by direct deposit, but for this EIP payments, they were a live check. So if that's the process they want to stick to, then it'd be defined in the agreement. And lastly, but most importantly, we recommended that they make EIP payments ratably throughout the year, as opposed to making them in November. So when they make the payment in November, right, it's at a higher rate than when the EIP payment would have been earned throughout the year. So if you're making these payments, ratably throughout the year, it's at one rate, as opposed to making the payment in November when most officers get a pay raise. So we calculated the difference. If they made payments ratably throughout the year for EIP, it would have resulted in a savings of over $200,000, $230,000. And we reached out to a couple of municipalities to see what they do with earned income payments. Quincy and Brockton, they both follow making payments ratably throughout the year. So it's the policy that we had recommended. So these items that I just discussed, I think Bill had reached out to the union, and clearly they didn't want to make any changes in their current practice as it relates to earned incentive payments.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. No. Yeah, I guess that was gonna be one of my first ones, but I guess, is that another one of those kind of benefits that?
It's as Young was saying, this has gone on for a very long time, and it's kind of been ingrained, I think, as a expectation in the police department that payment is coming in November in one lump sum, and everyone's waiting on that, waiting on that payment. Because it is a significant payment depending on, when you were hired. We did put on the table the Brockton model that again, Director No was suggesting, and we did not get any traction with it. and the 21 to 24 negotiations for either unit. I will say we do have it on the table with the IVPO at this point. And so, and we're in active negotiations. We'll see if we get anywhere with it.
All right, no, I appreciate that. And then the second question I had, well, I have two other questions. The second question I had is, I guess, what's the significance of having a check versus direct deposit on that? I mean, it's a 1 year thing, I guess, so it's not as big of a deal, but I guess I wasn't sure.
Live checks, it takes more effort to produce live checks. Paper involved, it's a little more expensive. Whereas
Well, that was kind of my thought process, is it's more labor intensive, you know, and you know, paper. But it's not like it's a every week thing, but it's still, you know, one of those issues. But if it's one of those, again, union things, then I don't want to put Bill in a corner.
Exactly.
You know,
I think they like.
it was one of those random things. I was just thinking, I was like, why are we still doing checks? But
Yeah.
the third question I had is, in your analysis, were there anything that you picked up in terms, one, the number of our officers who are actually taking part in, like, was there, I'm assuming there was a significant drop off, or in terms of folks that are post the 2009 date versus pre, or do we still have a number of folks still going after because it's still an incentive that they're getting in their pay?
Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when we did the audit, we noted 300 officers partake in the program. And that was back in like 2021. It is an incentive, so officers are incentivized to partake in the program, albeit it's less of a benefit today than it was back in, you know, prior to 2009.
Yeah.
It's, you know, they're being paid, you know, 50% less than when the program was in full force. Again, I could do an analysis to see how many officers partake in the program and update the compensation or the expense to the city.
I was, you know, curious from not just an expense thing, but just from an educational faction. I mean, especially since, you know, more and more we have, I would imagine, a younger police force. And so I was curious about just how many of our officers are actually going back to school, right? How many of them are getting these degrees, whether it's the bachelor's and the master's and whatever, you know, not just from the incentive pay, but just from the education perspective.
Plus we have the free community college now.
And you got the free community college, but so I was just curious from that perspective, you know, if there was a significant drop off. I mean, 2009 was obviously a while ago now, but that was just kind of where my head was at on that one. Anybody else have questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Counselor Govan. Counselor Allen, we see you at the gym. Hope it's a good game.
I'm listening in, but I'm distracted. The game was at 5:30, so I've been paying attention to that. So
It's all good.
yeah, I don't have anything else. I listened into everything, and good analysis by everybody, good help by Mr. Mahoney and stuff. But I don't have any questions.
Got it. All right. And well, with that, Mr. No, is there anything else? Leaving comments?
That's it. I appreciate the audit committee's time.
All right.
Thank you,
Appreciate.
Mr. No.
Thank you, Mr. No.
Thank you,
my
everybody.
colleagues for coming. Thank you, Mr. Mahoney.
Sure.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Mahoney.
We'll conclude today's audit meeting. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.